Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rosa and Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunello Rosa, who this week is joining us from Morocco, where he's attending the IMF meetings. Brunello, it's been a particularly hectic weekend for geopolitical analysts. As the world's attention was still pinned firmly on the war in Ukraine, we've just seen a quite brutal terrorist attack occur in Israel, carried out by Hamas, that's now instigated a multi-pronged war on several fronts. Uh, I mean, this seems like an event of historic proportions. Could you please give us some background on what's happening?
Yes, I'm talking here from Marrakesh. Of course, the climate of the meetings was really quite somber when we came in because this territory has been struck by an earthquake, and as we know, and then there's been a downward revision to the growth outlook, and clearly the situation internationally is not an easy one. And just before that, there was this terrorist attack or act of war, the way Netanyahu put it. Um, in effect, what happened is that on a Saturday, which is, as we know, the rest day of for Jewish people, and also on occasion of the Simchat Torah, which is a sort of important celebration and sort of holiday for Israel. And perhaps most importantly, on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur attack, there was kind of a multi-pronged attack by Hamas, which started sending rockets into Israel, but also started incursions from land, sea, and even with paragliders, so on the sky. So it clearly was not an extemporaneous attack as it has happened in the past. This has been planned for several months and executed um, in a very professional, if we could say that way, because Israel was taken by total surprise. They didn't expect that to happen at all, clearly, given the ability of people of these attackers to infiltrate the Israeli territory in so many ways. And clearly, lots of people in the hundreds, if not thousands, have been killed one side or the other, especially after Prime Minister Netanyahu promised retaliation, which started immediately.
This attack also comes and in interesting time sort of in the political relationship of the Middle East, just after we're seeing talks about possible agreements between countries such as Saudi Arabia, the US and Israel, but also sort of other powerful actors in the Middle East. Almost a sort of thawing of these tensions that perhaps just 5 or 10 years ago would have been considered unthinkable. How does this terrorist attack and then Israeli retaliation for it, how does this weekend change that calculus?
We all know that during the Trump administration, there have been the Abraham Accords, which were an important first step for the Israeli reconciliation with part of the Arabic and Muslim world. And then we have spoken already in previous weeks about the potential agreement between Saudi, Israel, and the US on a kind of multifaceted partnerships, which will foresee the US providing security to Saudi Arabia and the development of a civilian nuclear program. In exchange, Saudi Arabia would have won something on the conditions of Palestinians, and there will be a formal opening of diplomatic relationships between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which, as we know, have been cooperating on the ground for decades, but they don't formally recognize each other. And of course, that would have been an historical pact offered to Netanyahu, who was in great difficulty. Now, we've always known that it was one of the most contentious points was the conditions of the Palestinians that Saudi Arabia would have put on the table just to show once again that they do care about Muslim populations, wherever they are, and they are willing to take this request forward. But perhaps more, I would say, tactically than strategically. Clearly, the big chance of the accord was not on that. However, clearly, it's very hard for Netanyahu to be convinced to make any concession to the Palestinians. Even hypothetically, if he wanted to, it would be extremely hard for him as a prime minister in his current position with an ongoing war with the Palestinians to make any concession, which clearly represents a massive obstacle for the realization of the entire deal. So one wonders whether it was Iran that clearly was not included in this deal that would have lost the most on the conclusion of this agreement, and is probably the one that has most to gain from the current situation in Israel. This is not to say that it's Iran that is orchestrated this entire attack. There have been press reports suggesting that, in fact, it did provide some support, but providing support or sympathy for the action is totally different from having organized and orchestrated and executed. The fact that Hezbollah in Lebanon, on the north side, has taken some time to launch its own attack, and Hezbollah, as we know, is very much linked to Iran, is kind of an indication that is not necessarily the Persian country that is the mastermind of all this. So it's probably something a bit more complicated than that.
And lastly, Israel's it's never been a two political party state. There's multiple political parties, and Netanyahu, who's been leader for a long time, has faced a particularly sort of precarious moment with his own kind of leadership position. How will this war affect Netanyahu's own legitimacy within Israel?
Well, Netanyahu's position has been severely weakened by months of protest against his ill-conceived judiciary reform. And there have been lots of requests for him to teach the most right-wing parties of his coalition to join the centrist and form a sort of national unity government. And to some extent, this could be the occasion. In fact, the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, immediately suggested that would be Netanyahu's possibility to do so. Now the question is whether this national unity government can in fact be in a position of negotiating that deal with Saudi Arabia and the US. And one could even say, to some extent, if Netanyahu knew how to take ex mala bona, used to say the Latin, so to take the good things out of the bad things, because say, look, clearly here we need to find a more stable solution for the Palestinian issue, because otherwise we are going to be subject to those kind of attacks for the rest of our lives. So clearly a bigger and more permanent deal needs to be struck between Israel and its Arab neighbors. But even if theoretically this were to be possible, in practice, for a prime minister at war that has first and foremost to vindicate the killing of many of his citizens, just to reassure that he's able to provide security to the country, and it will be severely questioned in a few weeks about the failures of the intelligence in anticipating this potential attack. So, for the prime minister in this position, it's going to be extremely hard to do anything but move tactically, try to restore security, and continuing with the retaliation as he's doing, and very, very hard for him to start negotiating anything that is medium to long term. So, unfortunately, the situation is likely to persist for a little bit longer.
I mean, it really is quite hard to overestimate how important this weekend has been. It really was perhaps the largest failure of Israeli intelligence to anticipate an attack on its soil since the Yom Kippur War of 1973. And it's been very clear, kind of by the statements of both sides and the actions that we've seen, that this might be a war that drags on for quite some time. Certainly, the end is not in sight yet, so it's something we'll continue to watch for the weeks to come, but hopefully less than that. As always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Until next time.